Picture a quiet nursery. A 6-month-old lies on her back. Across the room, a speaker plays 2 syllables from Hindi, 2 sounds that, to you, are identical, but she hears the difference. She blinks, and her eyes slide toward the speaker. Right now, she is what scientists call a universal listener. A newborn's brain comes preloaded with the ability to tell apart the building blocks of speech from every language on Earth, from the clicks of African languages to the rolled consonants of Hindi and the tones of Mandarin. As adults, we're locked inside our native tongues. We hear an unfamiliar language as a blur of music, the edges between the syllables smeared together. But your baby has no such wall. Every language is equally clear down to its smallest pieces. But that extraordinary ability has a strict expiration date. Sometime in the next few months, that openness will fade entirely, vanishing in most cases before she blows out her first birthday candle. In the early 1980s, a researcher named Janet Worker began testing exactly when this happens. She played infants from English-speaking homes a series of foreign sound contrasts, specific differences in Hindi and Salish that do not exist in English. This graph tracks the baby's hearing. At 6 to 8 months, English-learning infants scored remarkably well, matching native speakers. But when tested at 10 to 12 months, the success rate plummets. In just weeks, they completely lost the ability to hear the contrast. It poses a very strange biological puzzle. The infant isn't slowly building up the ability to hear language. They actually start with all of it. Why would a perfectly healthy, developing human brain intentionally discard its own superior ability to hear the world? Scientists call this process perceptual narrowing, and the deeper you look at it, you realize it isn't a biological mistake. It is a deliberate commitment. Imagine trying to learn the melody of one specific song perfectly while standing in a room where 100 other songs are playing at the same time. The fastest way to master your song is to stop listening to the other 99. Patricia Kuhl discovered the perceptual magnet. We can visualize it as a central pulsing sphere, representing a perfect native sound. It generates a gravitational pull, swallowing up slightly different sounds, forcing the brain to hear them as the exact same syllable. Meaningless variations fade away. When Kuhl tested this effect on monkeys, the results were negative. They didn't show this magnetic clustering. This specific architecture of listening is deeply, uniquely human. By tuning out the vast majority of phonetic sounds, the brain frees up the massive cognitive resources it needs to specialize. Discarding universal hearing is the mandatory price the infant brain pays to achieve absolute fluency in its native tongue. So, is this narrowing process a fixed biological clock, winding down on the exact same schedule for every child? We can find the answer by looking at babies who grow up in households where 2 languages are spoken. Those infants stay flexible for a noticeably longer period of time. Because their environment demands they distinguish between multiple sets of speech sounds, their brains keep more auditory pathways open. The narrowing isn't a mindless countdown timer. The baby's brain acts as an intelligent, real-time filter, pruning away background sounds based entirely on what their specific daily life dictates is truly necessary to hold on to. If the brain is listening to the environment to decide what sounds to keep, it's tempting to think we can trick the system. Why not just play a foreign language video in the corner of the nursery to keep that universal window open? Patricia Kuhl tested exactly that. She brought 9-month-old American babies into the lab and exposed them to 12 sessions of Mandarin Chinese. This chart shows the results. Babies interacting with a live human speaker retained their ability to hear complex Mandarin contrasts, but the groups receiving identical sounds via a video screen or audio recording learned absolutely nothing. Their retention rate completely flatlined. The auditory and visual data were perfectly identical, but to the infant brain, those data points are neurologically useless without the active presence of a real person. This phenomenon, known as the social gating hypothesis, explains why infants only process language data when they perceive a social connection. Language learning requires a biological signal that the information being received is coming from a relevant social partner. The baby's brain is constantly checking for reciprocal interaction. When there is a warm face looking back, making eye contact, and reacting in real time to a babble, that responsiveness acts as a signal, It tells the brain that this information is vital. That high-pitched, sing-song voice we instinctively use with babies, parentese, actually functions as a high-definition filter for language. It highlights the specific phonetic contrasts the brain needs to learn, serving them up with exaggerated clarity. You don't need a rigid curriculum. You don't need expensive educational subscriptions or sets of flashcards to foster cognitive development in your child. Scientific evidence keeps pointing back to a remarkably simple truth. A child's development is driven by the focused, face-to-face attention of a parent. The most powerful educational tool on earth is the time you spend talking with your child about something terribly important.